Listening to Raconteurs News, it's 2018. I fucking said 2018, guys, instead of 2018. Like a wanker. This is live radio, people.
What the BBC tell us isn't what the government want us to believe, and just think of that, and, you know, think about who benefits, because at the bottom of everything is somebody benefiting from something somewhere. And there's one thing for sure, it fucking ain't me, and it ain't you.
And it's happening again. 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 And it's happening again.
It's down to us then to sort it out then, isn't it?
You get a dog, or a wolf, or a spider, or a snake. How can you get a snake to be the same species as a dog? It's easy. You call the species that bites you.
Weird.
That bites you.
Yeah, right.
That bites you.
Okay.
Yeah, you've got a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got a choice. Yeah, you've got a choice.
Well, do you want a punch in the face or a kick in the bollocks? Jesus.
So what did you want to talk about?
Bollocks. Yes, Jason's bollocks. No bills of exchange.
That's how much I'm interested in fucking cricket.
We're not sort of a modicum of intelligence, would you see, Billy?
Exactly.
All they're thinking is, all they're thinking is,
Which one of us are you going to propose to this evening?
A lot of men who don't have sex.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good evening, folks. It's Monday night. It's 7 o'clock, and it ain't crackerjack, so it's got to be Raconteurs News. I'm Andy Young, and unfortunately, I'm not Jason Holmes because Jason's still pretty poorly. So hopefully he's listening, and we haven't been mithering you all the time, Jason. So hope you're chilling out, mate, and getting better, and you're going to be back with us, back in full flow very soon. I've just got a little announcement to make in that there won't be a show tomorrow night because I'm going to be out on family business, and Jason, well, we know he's recovering, and Aidan, Paul are not set up for broadcasting on their own yet, so we're going to have a night off. Sorry about that, folks, but there's a bit of an archive to listen to. There's about 200 shows on the YouTube and on Raconteurs News, though. So if you miss us and you get bored, there's plenty to listen to. Oh, and I've seen somebody's logged into the chat that I missed last time they logged in. It's somebody we haven't seen in for a long time. It's Ian Alone. Good evening, Ian. Good to see you back. So what I'm proposing to do tonight, because my head's very preoccupied with the family business at the minute, I'm going to hand you over to Aid and Paul, and they're going to do the show, and I'll press a few buttons to make some music happen in the break and all that sort of shit. But it's billed as the Royal Wedding, not the Royal Wedding show, so I hope you'll all join me in wishing to fuck they don't talk about it all bloody night. Over to you, lads. How you doing?
I'm good, mate. Thank you very much. I'm just busy thinking, you know, that this will belongs to all of us and not just Webby's sandwiches. I've just had to sit and watch you eat a potted meat sandwich. Was that left over from your pack-up, lad?
No, mate. Cheese and tomato sandwich, that.
Oh, we don't have anything that posh at our house.
Oh, I had posh things at my house.
I tell you, it's really fun. It's really.
I mean, I've had to stay posh, because I mean, you know, there's a wedding at the weekend. Who did you say got married, Andy?
I think it was because Harry you, weren't it?
I've no idea. My Facebook feed is full of people saying, "For fuck's sake, don't talk about Royal Wedding or else I'll delete you," and they don't talk about fuck all else apart from the Royal Wedding. So I'm thinking, what's the point in that?
Well, it's not a royal wedding, though, is it? Because last time I looked, James Hewitt weren't a member of the royal family.
What
you know what I mean?
what you're trying to say there, Ed?
I'm not saying that there's no fucking way on God's earth that he come from fucking Charlie's loins. So if anybody's got any misconceptions or about what I've just said, there's no fucking way he came from Charlie's loins. But there is one thing I did want to say. I did catch, I can't remember what day it was. You know when you get these very brave, well, journalists, they're not other, because a journalist, somebody who investigates. One of these people on TV with a microphone on the streets of, it must have been Windsor, although surely that town should be called Saxe Coburg Gotha. Might just be me. Anyway, this TV person stuck a microphone in front of this guy who just happened to be walking past, you know, like they do, clearly not vetted him, and said, "Oh, are you excited about the royal wedding?" And he said, "My brother got married last week. That wouldn't be on the television, will it?" Which I thought was probably the best comment ever about the royal wedding. And anyway, it should be called our wedding because we fucking paid for it, apparently.
Well, yes. I must admit, Ed, it's been interesting to see my news feed over the weekend because I've got a few friends who, you know, a bit of flag wavers. They do like a, you know, quite a few friends have said, "Oh, it's nothing like a royal wedding," and blah blah blah. One of my friends said to me, "Webby, I love you to bits, but this stuff about the royal family, it's utter tosh." That was the words he used. And he was trying to claim that the amount of revenue that the royal family bring into this country, I'm going, "Oh, for fuck's sake, not the revenue bit again. They're worth 8 billion. Yet, you know, we've got to pay 30 grand for a wedding dress, and then we've got to pay for all the security. Then we've got to pay for the wedding itself. You know, all that's got to, you know, this can't be paid for by themselves. We've got to pay for it. And that's okay because they bring all the revenue in." Well, as somebody pointed out on my feed this week, that Chester Zoo took 4 times the revenue of the royal family did last year. So
really?
Yeah, Chester Zoo. So maybe we should actually promote like an orangutan to be actually the king of the swingers and make him king because that's bringing more revenue.
Yeah.
And we could keep it in the family at Chester Zoo as well.
We could ask them if they've got any lizards.
I think there's quite a few lizards in the lizard house.
Yeah, we could get some lizards. We could do that. That'd be a good idea.
But this is where it falls down for me, Ed, because you know people who are very dear to me actually think that you know, it's not the Queen's fault. She was born into this job. I put job in speech marks. She was born into this job. She's not asked for it. She's blah blah blah. And I'm going, wow, you've not even read like that much, you know, like 0.1 of a history. So taking everything what's been told to you and saying, right, that's enough for me. That part of history will do for me. I don't need to research anymore. I can put that in its own little box and keep it there. Whereas when you look back through the history of the royal families, I mean, there isn't anywhere. Where can you? Never mind where do you start. Where do you actually stop? I mean, it's quite amazing to me that it's still only 200-300 years ago that the royal families were actually still being accused of eating human flesh. Never mind hunting animals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
These stories have always followed these royal bloodlines. And when you look through the royal bloodlines, you've got Charlie bragging how you know, he's related to Vlad the Impaler. You know, this is it's not trivial stuff that people should be ignoring. People should know where this royal family comes from and what the attributes and how they got there, how the establishment got what they've got, and it's all through theft and genocide. But hey, that's okay because I can choose this. You know, I can choose to buy stuff at Asda, so I can use cognitive dissonance. If it wasn't for the royal families and the drug wars and the wars themselves, I wouldn't have any of this stuff.
No, and I mean, you know, when they say "Oh, my family fought for this land." Well, roll your fucking sleeves up, lad. I'll have a go.
Well, that's another thing. I mean, when we look at the world wars, I mean, everybody who's done any research can tell that every war's been a banker's war, and they're funding both sides, and there's money involved, and it's all about profits, and it's all about power. And yet, I had uncles who rolled those sleeves up, Aid, and went to Dunkirk, went over to Europe to fight, and you know, it's very easy for people to throw, "Oh, well, you'd be speaking German if it weren't for blah blah blah." It was a different era. It was a different different time in history. The groups that were fighting for power then are no different to the groups where we are now. We've just slid on the scale a little bit. It isn't completely far left ideology straight in your face, but all you've got to do is look at the attempt to control language. We've already got our language controlled legally, but now they want to not only control it legally, but tell you what you can and can't say. That is a very
who you can and can't say it about.
Exactly, and it's a very dangerous precedent to set, because if you can't criticise the ones who you feel are oppressing you or anything like that, that becomes illegal. All of a sudden, you can see there's a dictatorship. And this is where all these ideologies have always ended up. And it's no different now. Labour's not going to save anybody. Conservatives are not going to save anybody. Lib Dems not going to save anybody. If anybody's going to get into number 10 through this political system, they're only going to follow the same agenda that has been pushed. It's not going to change without people getting off their asses and doing something about it for themselves. But there again, then you get asked the question, well, where do I start? I'm just one man on his own, or I'm one woman on my own. Where do you start?
You start by being the change that you want to see.
Exactly.
So when they knock on my door and say, "Oh, can we count on your vote?" Say, well, firstly, I kept my vote. I didn't register it and give it away, so I'm not on your stupid register. But secondly, you and the furthest politician away from you in your ideology have got far more in common with each other than I have with either of you.
Yeah.
And that's because if you look at democracy, I mean, well, firstly, it's, as I've said loads of times, it's gang rape. You know, it's the, well, in inverted commas, majority imposing their wishes on the minority.
Yeah.
Well, that's what gang rape is, isn't it? And it doesn't matter what colour tie they wear, the road and the path are the same.
Exactly.
The road and the path are exactly the same. The destination is the same. You know, and as an example, everything boils down to money and power.
Exactly.
Now, I am just going to mention the royal wedding again. Oh, yeah, we've had to pay for that, and all the flag wavers are out and all the rest of it. I did actually ride my bike through, where was I? Glossop on Saturday. And there was a guy who'd got a stall out. The royal wedding was all finished. In fact, I think by that time, the other thing that I'm not interested in, the FA Cup final, I think that had finished as well. And there was this guy packing his stall up, and he still must have had about 500 flags. So clearly the people of Glossop didn't make that man all his money that day, because he'd still got lots of flags left that he didn't sell. Now, if they're saying, you know, we've paid for that, and people say, oh, I pay my taxes. Believe it or not, your taxes are irrelevant.
Exactly.
And the reason your taxes are irrelevant is the government actually don't need any of us to pay tax. They don't need it. And everybody's heard me harping on them loads of times about how our tax doesn't go to pay for roads and potholes and infrastructure and all the things and the NHS and education. It doesn't. It just goes to pay some of the interest, most of which we can't afford to pay, on the loans that our country need never have taken out in the first place. Now, the way that our government gets most of its money is by inflation. Now, the reported level of inflation at the moment is low. What it actually is, I don't know. But when you look at it and you say that, I don't know, I mean, what did £10 buy you 10 years ago? A bloody lot more than £10 buys you today. Now, that's not because the price of anything's gone up. It's because of the value of what you've got in your pocket has gone down. And I did hear a great analogy the other day, which came from the first chapter of an audio book. Now, the book is The Creature from Jekyll Island. If you've not heard of this, go to YouTube, put it into YouTube, and the first chapter is actually available free as an audio book. And I'm sure it's to get you to pay 25 quid to listen to the other 19 chapters. But even if all you do is listen to that free chapter and it'll waste 54 minutes of your life while you're laid in the bath one night, I would say go and listen to it, because it sets out how the Federal Reserve, which is neither federal nor has anything in reserve, came into being. And the creature from Jekyll Island refers to the meeting of the people who set it all up, or should I say they effectively ripped everybody off, and how they made it look like it was for the benefit of everybody else, when really all it was for the benefit of them, and to shift any losses onto the people who live in the United States. And just to prove it, that act was brought in, what was it, 1913, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it took the country till 1931 to go bust.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they even talk about the Trump administration, the Bush administration. So most of the money that they get is from inflation. And what they effectively do, they get us lot looking at tax, filling in our own tax forms, doing all our own work, and you're all on PAYE, and you're looking at your tax code. Oh, my tax code's gone up a bit. I won't be earning as much, or I won't have as much in my pay. When really, all that shit don't matter. Because that's tiny compared to how much you've been raped and pillaged of your savings, how much you've got to pay in interest on loans and the inflation, and how much that's actually robbed you of. But because the numbers don't change in your bank account, and the numbers don't change much in your pocket, we don't see it. And because we don't see it, we don't believe it.
Yeah.
But the real way that it all boils down to is money.
And
so, and how, so when people are looking at your wage slip and the price of things in shops, and it's not that, it's what that thing in your pocket isn't worth anymore.
It's the Weimar Republic. It's what happened with the Weimar Republic, where they were getting paid and they were filling wheelbarrows up full of cash, and they was running from getting paid at the wages and running straight to the shop. By the time they got to the shop, the price of a loaf of bread had shot through the ceiling, but it wasn't the price of the loaf. It wasn't the making of the loaf. It wasn't the ingredients. It was the devaluation of the currency. And you're talking about money now and what these people are doing. How many times have we got to keep saying that there's no such thing as this money? It isn't worth anything. The pound notes that I've got in my pocket are promises, and they're only worth what is accepted. So, I mean, the official definition of a £10 note from the Bank of England is what two parties agree it to be worth.
Yes, exactly.
So it could be worth a plate, it could be worth a car, it could be worth a pen, but it's whatever two parties agree it to be worth. It's not worth £10 of anything. You said £10 of what? Well, once upon a time, I could go and get £10 worth of silver, £10 worth of gold. Now that's not backed by anything other than the promise and the trust of each man and woman. The facts are that the banks are lending, or shall we say, they are buying bonds that are being supported by our Labour. So the factor is that it's still our money that the banks are facilitating for the corporation, for the corporate governments. It's not their own money. They haven't got it. They haven't got their own money. They are a paper warehouse that facilitates credit. That's all these banks are. There's no worth in any of them, Aid.
Well, I'm just going to get back to this book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. It's by a guy called G. Edward Griffin. I believe it was first published about 2010. Now, I'd heard of it before, and I'd caught snippets of it before. But what I would say is, if you've not read it, then please go to YouTube and just listen to the first. It's 54 minutes, and it's a red and black, thumbnail. And just listen to that 54 minutes. One thing that really struck me about it, and about the history of it all, was the guy who engineered it all, was Warburg, a guy called Warburg.
Yeah.
And, you know, in Annie, Daddy Warbucks, well, that's who that character was based on. But he actually got his ideas from the English banking system.
Of course.
That's where the idea came from. So, you know, when people say, oh, you know, it's about the Federal Reserve, the Fed. Well, it's not federal. They've got nothing in reserve. It is a con. It's not there for your benefit. It's there for their benefit. And seriously, when you listen to that, it's one of those, if you've not heard it and you've not read it, even if you don't spend any money, just listen to that first 54 minutes, chapter 1. It is well worth your time and well worth you just wasting 54 minutes of your life, because the information that's in there and how it's put across is invaluable. And the other thing I'd say is, if you've not watched Money as Debt, and again, that's a YouTube one, watch that first, and then listen to this first chapter of The Creature from Jekyll Island. You know, and it's actually quite eye-opening, especially for somebody like me who worked in the finance industry and then realised that the whole thing was a complete and utter fraud.
Yeah. Yeah, I've studied the book. In 1994, that book come out.
Is that when it was, 94?
94. I think it's been republished since once, because Edward Griffin became more prominent after 9/11 because he was talking about where the finances were going. And we always talk about who benefits from these things. And it always comes back down to banks. Now, when you start talking about the banking system, you can't help but talk about people that you're not allowed to talk about. Do you know what I mean? And yeah. that anybody who's a slight skeptic would think, well, that's a bit interesting that you can't criticise these people who are very prominent in the banking system. You can't get away from that. You can't get away that these people have been prominent throughout history, popping up in, well, at least over 260 countries, that these people have been, shall we say, encouraged to leave those countries. Are you encouraged to leave because you need to leave because you're helping the country that you're actually participating in, or are you actually fleecing the country and robbing them? If you look at every country that's got the central banking system right now, which is every country that we're not at war with, they're making money hand over fist because they are not lending money and they are taking physical wealth for the same profit. The testing ground for me was Ireland in 2008. They collapsed the mortgage market. And they're still stealing properties. They're stealing properties that they have no authority to take this property. They've got the relying on the most fragile of statutes, or possibly even part a very small bit of common law, where in your in your terms and conditions, you've actually agreed that if you can't fulfil the obligation that you've agreed to, which is pay so much a month plus interest, you will gift the property to in order for the creditor to be paid. Well, the factor is that the banks aren't telling you that you're both fucking parties. The bank should be stating, well, the debtor is paying the creditor, but you are both. They don't bother telling us that. And these banks have set it up, exactly as you said, eh? They've set this up to keep doing this. And this scam is perfect. The European Parliament also aided them in this because Europe didn't want to be involved. They know how big this scam is. And they said there must be an insurance policy that's taken out. And the banks all take out an insurance policy. It's a third-party liability. You can read something like Section 90 to Section 113 in the European Parliamentary Directives of 2006. They talk about third-party liability. That means not only have they sold my mortgage, securitized it and sold the mortgage to reduce my liability by whatever percentage they've sold it at, they don't bother telling me that, but then when there's default, they claim the full mortgage policy in full from the insurance, and they don't tell people that. And then they come for the house, and they can't foreclose. They say they say we're going to foreclose. Well, you can't foreclose on something when you haven't actually lent them anything. You've got no agreement to foreclose on. If I lend you a tenner, Aid, and I physically give it you in a £10 note, then I'm going to. It's it's reasonable for me to expect something that I can promise for £10 worth or whatever we can agree on. You will compensate me for that. Now, if we had an agreement that I had caused you loss by not doing that, then you could foreclose on the agreement. The banks can't foreclose on these agreements because they've got nothing to claim on. So what are they actually foreclosing? They're foreclosing on behalf of the creditor, you.
Which is you.
Which is you. So they're foreclosing on behalf of you to take money off you to compensate you.
Yep. So it's a great one. And the other one is, you know the insurance policy, the indemnity policy. I think when I bought my house, which I no longer own, by the way, because as I've said many times, I've bought and paid for 2 houses and I don't own one. But that's life. Well, it's mine. My life. Not my house. I think I paid about £380 for this indemnity policy. Now, to indemnify literally means to make good.
Yeah.
That's what it means. So imagine I didn't pay that mortgage and they come and repossess something they never possessed in the first place. That always gets me. And like you say, they're claiming on for you, from you.
Yeah. And they don't know which section to claim under because I think it's Section 21 of the County Courts Act is foreclosure or repossession. And as you just said, you can't repossess something that you've never possessed. So the banks never own that property, so they can't repossess it. So do they go in under foreclosure? Well, they do, but they can't go in under foreclosure of the agreement between you and the bank. And as far as I can see, all they can do is foreclose what you failed in order to pay the creditor. They are still claiming that they are the creditor. And this is where it's starting to fall down now because people are challenging it and they are running around trying to hide under various pieces of legislation. And the top and bottom of it is finding the right argument. There's lots of people who've challenged this. There's some great cases that a lot of people have been involved in. And there's nothing wrong with what they've done and what they've said, but they haven't got the outcome. So what is it that we are missing? We are missing something. Simple,
my view is the only thing that you miss is, when you go into court, which is a commercial venue, that ultimately the banks own, because the banks own, the 13 families own everything, you're never going to get remedy. You're never going to win, because the two teams, one of them's got the referee on his side, and it's not you.
No.
Plus, when you go into court, you don't know all the rules and regulations, because you're not an officer of the court. They are. They know what rules they're playing, and you lose. So to say the odds are stacked against you, I'm not a betting man, but there's no way I'd put any money on that, because you're going to lose.
Yeah.
You know, so if anybody listening is in a situation with the mortgage or a loan or anything like that, this world is set up to fuck you. It is not your fault that you're scraping round on the floor for the crumbs. This system is set up to make sure that you stay there and that you gradually slip further and further and further down that ladder without noticing, because of the hidden tax called inflation.
This is it's not even, it's not just understanding that you can't go into these places. It's not, no, let me put it a different way. It's not that you can't go into these places and win. It's when it becomes a prominent case, anybody who would look at the case from an independent and non-biased point of view will be kept well away from it.
Yes.
They only want people who are going to find in favour of the corporations, because the executive and the judiciary, as you said, are working together. It's two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner.
It absolutely is.
The fact is, you know, it's very easy for people to say, oh, well, you should do this, you should do that. I've been there. I've been at the front line with these mortgages and the banks at the courts. And people have said, oh, you should have done this and you should have done that. I've virtually tried everything. I've virtually tried everything, including their own legislation. And for somebody to turn case law over and say, I can't see that, because if they saw it, they would have to apply it. So they decided that they would just state, I take the bank's word that you owe them money. Now, that's another dangerous precedent, Abe, because then surely I can take you to court tomorrow and tell the judge that you owe me 25 grand, and he says, well, I believe Paul Webster, you better pay him, Abe. Because that's how it works, isn't it, Abe? I don't have to prove anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you watch... everybody must have seen at least one episode of Judge Judy. You can learn a lot from that, because what she says,
it's a good program. It's equity.
Yeah, and once you understand how it works, she basically looks at both sides of the argument, and she has got to feel and believe, because she's the judge, that one side is more truthful than the other. And that is the one that she will find in favour of. Yeah. Period. That's it. That and that's the ruling.
Well, that's what equity is. That's how it should be. It's who's had loss, and if both have had loss, who's had the most loss?
What's the difference?
And who caused that loss?
And the other thing that you can learn as well is when she says judgment for the bangs the hammer down, gets up and walks out, she actually physically picks the case up and walks out with it.
Yeah.
And that's so that you can't look in it again.
Yeah.
And she talks about the four corners, within the four corners of this contract. And all these little things, and I've picked up on it and gone, hang on a minute, I've heard that before. What does that mean? And it's made me sort of look. But the bottom line is, it all boils down to money. And, you know, you were talking about repossessing houses. When we've all heard these reports, well, they're not reports, they're just fucking... I'm sorry, but journalists have really started to piss me off now. Because a real journalist will actually do some investigation. Who's the last real journalist I can think? Roger Cook. Can you remember when every week somebody tried to beat him up? for dodgy dealings and scammers and God knows what. He's the last sort of journalist that now they don't look into anything. They just repeat what they're scripted to say.
Yeah.
And the reason they don't look into anything is because if they do, they're out on the fucking ear. They've gone. Because the same people that own the banks. Who was that? John Piper. It was just flashed up in the chat room there. The banks, and we've all seen the reports. Oh, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Where they say, oh, well, the banks aren't very asset rich at the moment. So the authorities have told them that they've got to get more assets. Well, guess how they fucking do that? They repossess your house. That's how they do it. And the way they do it is, they tell a small business owner, oh, sorry, we're stopping your line of credit. So he then makes all his lads redundant. And them 10 lads have all got mortgages, who then can't pay them, who then get their houses repossessed. So all of a sudden, the bank own a business, some property, and 10 fucking houses.
Well, look at it. How they got it though. Those 10 lads who went for mortgages all believed that the bank was actually lending them money, which all 10 were categorically wrong about. All 10 lads had their mortgages I would say guaranteed, but let's say 99% certain that all 10 mortgages were securitised and sold,
yes.
Which meant that all 10 lads had their liabilities reduced by whatever amount the banks had sold it for, which they never found out about. Then when that comes about, where they to lay this off or you can't pay them, then they default. And each 10 of those lads have an insurance policy that's paid out in full. So each lad has had money made off their back by the bank through selling the mortgage. Then they've had money laid to them 10 times. So 100 grand, let's say 100 grand insurance policy paid out 10 times.
Yeah.
You've got that, and then you've got the properties being taken and sold. And they've not fucking lent a penny. And people are still fighting and arguing for the banks.
And so, I mean, very conservatively, if the bank, I'm not going to use the word lend, facilitated credit to the tune of 100,000, they'll get a conservative minimum back of 400,000. A foreclose, whatever word you want to use. So is it in the bank's interest for you to get to the end of that mortgage, or is it in the bank's interest for them to find a way, using the system that we know is a con, because you've only got to read the first chapter of The Creature from Jekyll Island to find out, very conservatively, they'll make £500,000 off of that.
Easy.
£500,000. Easy.
If you take it 12 months, you probably don't even need 12 months, because from the signature on the terms and conditions, within a matter of 6 to 8 weeks, you've already made. Again, for a 100 grand mortgage, say it's sold for 90, the bank has made 90 grand for nothing. Perhaps nothing. They've used your funds to make 90 grand. And they're going to be able to facilitate further credit based on that. The factor is that anybody can make, and I keep putting money in speech marks, but anybody can make this amount of money if you've got a bank. Because the banks are I always use an analogy that if you give a man a gun, he can rob a bank. Give a man a bank and he's robbing the fucking world. Yeah. And it's being done legally. These people have got to understand that Hitler, Churchill, Mao, Stalin, none of these people did anything illegal. It was all perfectly legal what they did. Everything. So the factor is, if somebody says, hey, if we write this bit of legislation, we can steal that and it's legal, and people who are ignorant to the fact of what legal and lawful mean, then they just go, oh, right, they can do that. Well, that's bullshit. That's just a cop-out. And I understand about people saying, "Oh, what can I do?" As you said, be the change. Change something, no matter how small it is.
And I mean, we do tend to go over stuff in different ways, but the same subject and the same things crop up now and again, or all the time. And that's because the 13 families and the money system are at the absolute core of everything that is shit in your life.
Yeah.
Even down to the fact, you know, a lot of couples split up because of money.
Yeah.
A lot of families split up. You know, not just husband and wife, but, you know, kids are split up because mum and dad couldn't stop arguing about, you know, the root of all evil, money.
Yeah.
So this just doesn't affect numbers on a piece of paper. This is real stuff that's affecting, you know, I mean, how many people have committed suicide because of the number on the bottom of a bank statement that happens to have a minus figure in front of it?
Far too many, mate. Far too many.
You know, fuck them. Fuck your funds. Fuck your flag. Fuck your war. You know, let's everybody just sit back and think, hang on a minute, just think about this logically. Think about what money actually isn't. And it is not, it's a currency, it's not money.
Exactly.
I think in this Jekyll Island thing, I'm not quoting it, I'm paraphrasing, because I can't remember the exact thing with it. He said, 2,000 years ago in Rome, a piece of gold would buy you a very nice coat, a very nice pair of sandals, and, you know, probably a very nice sword. And today, that one piece of gold would still buy you a very nice suit, a very nice pair of shoes, and a very nice umbrella.
Mm.
For the same, you know, because gold, silver, platinum, there is a finite amount of it. The same gold that we wear today is the same gold that was around in Roman times. All right, you know, there's people out in Australia and whatever digging more and more up, but the amount they're digging up doesn't dilute the value of the gold much because it's always in high demand.
Yeah.
Whereas when you've got a currency that's completely fiat, it's based on nothing but promises. Promises to pay fuck all to nobody, really. And when you've got that, it just keeps diluting and diluting and diluting and diluting. And they use phrases like quantitative easing. Yes, we're going to make the call worth even less.
Well, the thing is, if me and you do quantitative easing aid, that's called counterfeiting money. We'd be in jail.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, for quantitative easing, the only people that works for is the bank.
Yeah.
Not the government, not us. The only way to quantitative ease and it actually to work is to fly an helicopter over Sheffield and tip 50 million quid out of it and let everybody pick it up. That might actually do a bit of good.
Probably.
But when they do this QE and what they call it, QE1, QE2, wonder where they got the idea for that from. Fucking hell.
I think we're fucking right. No, you couldn't. But the factor is that you've got a currency that people are actually passing off as worth something. Don't get me wrong. People have said to me, "Oh, well, give us that £20 note that's worthless in your pocket." There, then maybe I'll have that. You know, it's easy to do that. It's trying to understand what money is and what money isn't, as what you've just been saying there. We can look at metals and say they are worth something, but we've already shown that we can do stuff. I mean, you're a big advocate for anarchy, and we've already shown that we can do all this stuff with no money. We've got roads. I mean, they're saying, "Oh, look at all the potholes." People will fill those fucking potholes in, providing they were going to get access to pieces of paper that they can go and use to go on holiday or buy something with or whatever. I would go to my job for the same reason. But let's look at what we are not liable for, what we are struggling to try and pay. We live in a debt-based economy. You are being told that you must pay these bills. It is impossible. You cannot pay debt with debt. So every time, no matter how many fucking jobs, no matter how hard you work, no matter how high your principles are, no matter how the tallest mountain you can stand on and put your soapbox on, it doesn't matter. You cannot pay a fucking bill. So every time you try and pay, you make the national debt worse. Therefore, we need more quantitative easing. Therefore, the debt gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until there's nothing left. And they say, well, look at what you've done. Now we're going to have to take all these facilities off you. We're going to have to take the gas, water and electric off you. We'll privatise it. Well, it's the running that's been privatised, not the sale of the actual grid. Mm-hmm. This is business. This is business, and it's about the management. This is not about losing things. It is us taking our eye off the ball and believing that these people have got authority to make decisions on our behalf. And people can say, well, they've been voted in, so that's what they're there for, to make these decisions. Well, if the decisions that are being made are wank, then surely the people who are voting don't want that, and they can change it. But that's not what we've got. That's not what we've got to change. What can we change? Look around you. Who else do you vote for? Do you vote for him? Oh, he's got... I know a fella who said, I wouldn't vote for Corbyn because he doesn't wear a suit. Now, if you're basing politics on stuff like that, then you might as well not even fucking bother yourself. If you're going to vote for somebody because they've got a suit and tie on, they're the worst fucking criminals I've ever come across. The ones that wear suits and ties. So you debunk yourself, and the people who I vote for Labour because my dad did. It's not good enough anymore. It's not good enough to vote for Labour because your dad did, because you haven't got a fucking clue why your dad voted Labour, if your dad even knew why he voted Labour. Because all I got was working man's party. Working man. Are they for the working man? I fucking don't think so. Not after Tony Blair's fucking New Labour that was, set up by the Conservatives. Thatcher even bragged about New Labour being her greatest achievement whilst Prime Minister, because they've got the two parties that they control.
Yeah. Which is not anybody voting.
Exactly. So
yeah,
I have a lot of sympathy for people who are trying to get their heads around this stuff. I struggle to unlearn everything I've been taught and get my head around this. Once you let go of what you've been taught and start again and realise that there is no such thing as money, it's all about promising to pay for something, and that is accepted on a trust. They take your promise, put it with other promises, and promise for something else. That is the society we live in. If we can get our heads around that, we can actually start taking control and going into these banks and saying, listen, I want to know what my credit rating is and what I'm worth, because I know you're not lending me anything. Now let's sit down and have an open agreement. This is why people do not sign contracts for mortgages. If there was a mortgage contract, you would have to be told that you are both debtor and creditor, that the bank aren't lending you anything, that they securitise the mortgage, and there's a third-party liability. They would have to state all that, otherwise the contract would be void. I mean, you can void a contract because there's a comma or an apostrophe or a full stop missing. This is blatant stuff. And if you do not have an inkling to even understand about what you're going to use, the only thing that is worth anything in this life for you in legal terms is your signature. It gives you the ultimate power, but if you don't know how and when to use that signature, then you're gonna get raped. You're gonna get bummed by this system, because that's what the system system's there for. I tell people now that I don't have a mortgage, I paid mine off, I own my house. No, you don't. You don't own it. The system's not set up for you to own anything. You have the property title. You own the equity, and that's it.
Yeah, because you registered your house with the land registry, and what do you do when you register anything? You give up legal title to it.
And the thing is, nobody has gone for the allodial titles. I tell people now who've got mortgages who are paying for it, I said, get them onto land registry and claim the allodial. Nobody's got it. Most of these properties aren't claimed by the allodial title. That's why we have it on rent. That's why the Crown own everything. We rent it, and we allow them to do that. Just going back to this, I mean, you mentioned some dickheads got married over the weekend. This wedding over the weekend, the days leading up to it in Windsor, the police virtually bulldozed all the homeless people off the streets. Then they go and interview some dickhead who's got a Union Jack hat on that says the scum on it, I mean the sun, and he's being interviewed and he's saying, oh yes, I've been here for 5 days now. Oh right, have you? He says, yes. The people of Windsor are lovely. They've given us food, they've given us drink. What were these fuckers doing for the homeless then? You've come to wave fucking flags at some cunt who's worth 8 billion, and you're being fed by the people of Windsor how lovely they are. Well, do you know what? Maybe charity should be getting a little bit close to home. So bulldozing the fucking homeless people, maybe you should have fed them.
I'll tell you what, I'm just going to quote George Carlin again. George Carlin was on about, they have the war on terror and the war on drugs. Why don't they have a war on homeless?
Exactly.
There's no fucking money to be made out of it. That's why.
Look at where they've gone with it, Ed, though. They're now arresting people for not being able to pay a fine for being homeless. This is where does this mentality go? We know where this mentality goes, and people don't think it can happen again. It mesmerises me. They had down at on the streets of Reading, the police took a. Did you see the charity bus?
I didn't know.
For the homeless. Well, the homeless bus was taken by the police. So now it was helping people like teens who were prostituting. Those teen prostitutes are back on the streets now because the police won't give them the fucking charity bus back.
Oh my God!
So people are trying to do things for people. A friend of the show, Lindsay set up the homeless project, but it's people who are doing that, and then you've got the authorities who think that they can just, no, you're not having that. We'll just do this. We'll just do that, and then you're putting it into mainstream media that gets spun. I mean, it's spun from all kinds of different things to make it sound not as bad. You mentioned the Skripals earlier before the show, Ed. Now, apparently, they've been released. Now, this fucking nerve agent is meant to be the most lethal nerve agent, and like a smatter of it would fucking kill you. These people have wallowed in it for weeks, and they've been released. We don't even know. They've not come out. They've not said. There's no. If they've just been released after this nerve agent, where's the interviews? Where's the media chasing round after them saying, "Can we have an interview with you, Skripal?"
Yeah, well, they're not there, are they? And I wonder why they're not there.
I wonder as well.
Yeah. Just while we're on money, I did when I'm in my customers' houses, inevitably they've got the telly on, and they're all addicted to it, so it never gets switched off. And there was a Trawlermen program on. These guys out in Scotland, and they're off for 7 or 8 days fishing, off the coast of Norway and all the rest of it. And I've never seen people work hard like that in my life. I mean, they graft. Absolute grafters. And there was this boat owned by a father and his son. And when you cast a net, you're not sure what's going to come up. So if that week the fishing authorities decide that you're not allowed to catch cod, you can only catch haddock, and the guy comes back with a boat full of cod, he's still got the loan to pay for his boat. He's still got all of his lads to pay. So what does he do? He lands the fish and he fucking sells it. So anyway, they decided they were going to fine this guy £500,000.
Fucking hell.
And if him and his son didn't pay it back within 2 years, they were going to prison for 18 months. Now, this is a man who's been at sea for most of his life in one of the most dangerous jobs there is, and he's managed to get a boat with his son to skipper this boat to try and earn a living and give other people a job. And because he lands the wrong fish, they're going to send him to prison. He's had to remortgage his house, his son's house. He's sold everything that he fucking possesses. And the guy's there hoping that he don't split a net or lose a net or something like that. Otherwise, him and his son are both going to go to prison for 18 fucking months. What the fuck is that all about?
Fucking hell. Well, again, it comes back to talking about these fucking banks who think that they can do whatever the hell they like. I mean, I've seen that. I'm not sure about those two in particular, but I've seen the fishermen who are dumping tons of dead fish back into the water because they've overfished. They're not allowed to sell it. What? I don't get it. I really don't get it. I can understand overfishing, but I don't get dumping dead fish. It
makes no sense, does it?
No, there's got to be another way of doing it. I mean, again, I'm just reading an article here. It's today's article, jailed for being homeless, how councils across Britain are targeting the UK's most vulnerable. Fined, jailed and convicted. The UK's homeless are facing serious criminal consequences as councils use public space protection orders, statutes introduced by Theresa Dickhead to target those sleeping rough. Do you know what? It's fucking disgusting, yet I know people who will justify that article. They will justify it.
It's wrong to put homeless in any little cliched group, but, and there is a but, most people who are homeless aren't homeless through choice. They're homeless because either the system has screwed them, or because they came from the care system and were never given a break, or they came from an abusive family and ran away, or because they served in the military and can't get the help for all the PTSD that they're suffering from. Now, I'm sure there's a million other reasons why, but they're just a few examples of why people end up being homeless. So how ridiculous is it to hear what you've just said? It's not just ridiculous, it's fucking insulting to the human race.
But the fact is that it's only insulting to the human race if the human race are actually taking notice that they're being insulted. And the fact is that there's so many people who don't give a fuck. You know, it doesn't impact on their lives. Fucking X Factors on whatever. People justify things for all the wrong reasons. Yet I'm pretty sure if it was your mum, your dad, your brother, your sister, your son, your daughter, I'm pretty sure that you'd be pulling all the stops out to try and make things different.
And you know, turning a blind eye is not good enough anymore.
No, it's not. You've got, at this point, for me, people have got to get involved, but I would never encourage people to just go and do it, because I don't think I could have been encouraged to go and do it. It came to me. I didn't have any choice. But the fact is that I've explained this stuff to people, and they're still going to teach their children how to pay bills in a system that you can't pay bills. So I haven't got a fucking clue how they're going to do that. But
well, Paul, we've managed to get to 8. We've managed to get to 8 o'clock with you skirting round bills without bills or
said it, Emma.
You've managed to
said it.
Yeah,
you said it.
Anyway, listen. Just Andy's just popped up on my screen again, which means he's ready to play a piece of music. Just before we do that, I just want to play what I played to you earlier, just before we came on air. And this is one of my old friends rang me earlier, and I was just about to sit down and eat my tea. So I sent his call to voicemail, and basically he'd been clearing out his old studio, and he'd found a 7-inch reel of tape from 1985, and he left this on my voicemail. So you're going to hear my voicemail come in. Just hang on a minute, it's just going to dial through. I'm just going to stick it on speaker. And this is
Welcome to your EE voicemail. You have one new message. First new message received today at 5:39 p.m.
Doing a DIY job, whether you need a nail, chainsaw, garden equipment or paint and wallpaper, you must see our new showroom. Brian's DIY at the corner of Robert Street and Grammar School Road in Brigg have got the lot. The new extension has just been completed and it's full to the brim with everything you need to tackle any job at home or in the garden. We stock only top quality brands of paint and wallpaper, and our stock is of a full range of Black & Decker power tools. Brian's DIY also stock all types of wood, both plain or rough, by the sheet or by the piece. There are shelves full of hand tools, boxes full of screws and racks full of things to glue it, to nail it, to hold it, to clean it, to paint it and to fit it. For the largest DIY store in Brigg, with the most comprehensive range, it has to be Brian's DIY at the corner of Robbie Street and Grammar School Road. Phone 53340. That's Brigg, 53340.
And that's how bad I sounded 33 years ago on the radio. My God. I had a really high-pitched voice. Brian's DIY. And I have to say, poor old Brian, apparently he got prostate cancer, but good to know that he's fighting fit again. He's getting through that. And Brian's DIY to this day is still open in Brigg. So I'd like to think I played a little bit of a hand in keeping him open. Anyway, we've got Andy Young's popped up on my screen. We are halfway through. We are going to play a tune. Andy.
Cracking first hour, guys. We'll be back after a little tune, but first, I feel we've really got to do this bit of a public safety announcement.
Watch out, Super Leaders and the chat, and he's after a wife.
time. When you try to chase your dream, you never seem to know the time. You never recognize the signs, and nothing's what it seems. Both your eyes wide open, you see the shape I'm in. It wasn't of my choosing, it's only bones and skin. And I will plead no contest if loving you's a crime. So go on and find me guilty just one more fucking time. And if I would have been a bad man, you would have seen the good in me. You would have seen the other, the good man I could be. And since I am a good man, the same was all the same. Nothing I could do, nothing I could do. Pass you by in time. All things just a perfect crime. It's just the way we are. All your instincts let you down. It's not a case of love in vain. It's not a case of love insane. It's enough to break your heart. Both your eyes wide open, you see the shape I'm in. It wasn't my idea that I'd be the one to sin. And so all those years together weren't worth a fucking dime. So go on and find me guilty just one more fucking time. All our years together weren't worth a fucking dime. So go on and find me guilty just one more fucking time. All our years together weren't worth a fucking dime. So go on and find me guilty just one more fucking time.
Good evening, welcome back to Raconteurs News, the Not the Royal Wedding special. Jason's still recovering from his operation, so...
Hang on a minute, Andy, and the fucking bug that he caught in hospital, which would, you know...
Yeah. Well, it kind of goes without saying about the NHS, really, doesn't it? The National Harm Service, yeah, but I don't want to say too much on that matter because our little grandson's in hospital at the minute, and so far so good. So we just, I'd rather stay out of that one tonight if it's all the same. But I'm going to hand it over to you two guys again. Just want to thank everybody for listening. If you've got anybody you know who listens to us on Facebook normally, we put the message out there that there is no Facebook Live tonight. I'll try and get it sorted another time when Jason's not around, but for tonight you just have to send them a message to raconteursnews.com or Raconteurs News Spreaker account and they'll be able to listen then. So, right, over to you two guys again. I'll see you at the end.
All right, cheers, mate. Webby, something that sort of cropped up while I was making a brew during that music break. We were talking about houses and repossessed and money and, you know, how it all goes around but never comes around to us.
Yeah.
And that is, when we were talking about houses, you know when you get these really, really wealthy and titled people,
yeah,
they don't have property, they have an estate.
Yeah.
Now, excuse me, that's somebody sending me a message. Whoever's sending me a message, yes, I am. Now, there is one other person, what a shit word. One other man who has reportedly changed his property into an estate, and that's Bill Bailey, you know, the musician come comedian.
Yeah.
Because apparently he's well into the sort of stuff that we talk about. To what depth, I don't know. Never met him, don't know him, you know. But apparently he's changed his property into an estate. Now, I've bought and paid for two houses but don't own one. And I know a lot of the reason why you are where you are, mentally and physically, is because of property. Has that ever sort of come up with you, turning things into an estate?
Yeah, it's trust law. It's from what I've seen about the trust, and I've worked with some people who are really into the trust. The Express Private Trust seems to hide everything from what people can grab onto, and I suppose it would be a good way of looking at it that it shows you how to act when you want to act in public and when you don't want to act in public. The trouble is, for everything that we do, we always act as the public entity. We don't know how else to act. So that's where then the free man of the land stuff all came into it, where people didn't know how to act in the private, so they were doing the free man of the land stuff, but they were doing it in a jurisdiction that couldn't be heard. You know, so it was.
Yeah.
I would never disagree with anybody who's talking about the free man of the land stuff not being incorrect, because it isn't. It is correct. It's right, but you're not going to get anywhere using it in the places where they have been trying to be used. Because I tried to use it. You know, I'm a man. All that stuff. They're not interested. As long as you're saying that, they're just pointing at what they're standing under. He's not mentioned this. Just keep tapping that. Just keep tapping away. He's not mentioned that. We'll stand right here and let him talk about everything else. And that's the danger about when you're doing the free man stuff. Whereas when you've got a trust and everything else is put into that trust, the only ones that can be summoned are the trustees. You can't be grabbed at. And this is... For me, it's that buffering. It's keeping them at arm's length. What are they going to attack you over? You know, we've heard about the legal name, that this legal name is the fraudulent name that's been given to you. Again, I can understand that and I can see it, but if I could pick up that name and use it when I wanted to use it within a system that would work for me, then that would be different, I would feel. Whereas the system's not set up to work for us, and we need to know how to make that system work for us, and that's you're going to have to go right back to a lot of basics for that, Abe. And the people I speak to anyway aren't ready to go back to that. They want to keep thinking that they can keep their head down as long as they work hard they won't get touched. Well, that is the Martin Niemöller syndrome, isn't it? When he didn't say anything because he wasn't a trade unionist, and then he wasn't Jewish, then he wasn't this, then he wasn't that. And then by the time they came for Martin Niemöller, there was nobody left to say anything. And that's the situation that they've got people into now, because people I know, I can put, you could put a 6'4" fella built like a brick shithouse in front of a 5'2" woman, and she will fight like tooth and nail for a handbag, purse, kids, anything. But bank coming for your house, bailiffs, council, fucking hell, that's a different kettle of what's-its. They're not interested. They want to run away and stick their head under a pillow and hope everything goes away. And then they'll say, well, I'll just keep paying. I'll just pay it because that's what I do. I work hard and I pay. Well, you can't pay. So whichever way you want to go, you're selling the future of your children and grandchildren down the fucking toilet, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. And I mean, my view on all of this and how I ended up here, because I got a mate, Jason, who kept plugging away at me. But it's because my sense of right and wrong is bigger than anybody could possibly imagine. And when I see, I'm not rich, but I live a reasonable life. I go to work, I've got sufficient, and I go on holiday. So in sort of the general terms of what we expect out of life, I guess I don't do too bad. Mm-hmm. Oh, and I've got a nice motorbike that I like. And I don't have any debt. I haven't got anything that's a minus against me name, let's put it in that way. But when I see other people, good people, who have done nothing wrong, many of them fought for what they do and was fighting for their country, even though they were just fighting a rich man's war for the benefit of a rich man. But in their mind, they were doing a good thing. And these people have not only got nothing, they've got less than nothing. And then when they've got less than nothing, so they haven't even got a roof over their head or any food to put in the mouth, they then get arrested for being homeless.
Yeah.
How fucking bad has this got to get before people say, hang on a minute, what you're doing to that man is wrong?
And don't forget, there's no agenda, remember? We've had guests on the show telling us there's no agenda for this. So there's no agenda to make people homeless. Then there's no agenda to punish people for being homeless. It's, the banking system cannot keep making the money that it is making. It needs to get rid of people now. And this is the beginning of it. It starts off with the homeless because, some people don't like that pressure, do they? Walking past somebody who's got a paper cup in front of them. They don't want to be shopping for all their stuff when there's a homeless fella or a girl there. They want rid of those. And, then all of a sudden, oh, look, all the homeless people are gone, so we haven't got this problem now. If it doesn't affect you, it's very easy for you to use that cognitive dissonance and just wipe it away and just justify it somehow for your existence. No, I don't get me wrong, Ed, I've done it myself. I've done it myself in my life. It doesn't affect me, so why should I bother? Well, the reason why you should bother is because it doesn't affect you right now doesn't mean it's not going to come and kick you in the balls and punch you in the face later. I've unfortunately found it kicking me in the balls and punching me in the face.
I tell you what, there's a really good comment, and I'd forgotten about this one. In fact, Heath did a version of this song. And I think it was the Beautiful South did this song. And this is what's come up in the chat room, and it's Andy who's put this. Even when, oh God, stop flicking up. Even when the kids were starving, they all thought the Queen was charming.
Yeah.
And that just about says it all, really. Because if you think that the Queen is nothing to do with the banks, oh, trust me, she is. Saxe Coburg Gotha and the bank Goldman Sachs.
That's what the problem is, though, isn't it, Ed? The people are tending, they can be diverted very easily to this little old woman who doesn't do anything other than does as she's told. She's only a figurehead. She hasn't got any power anymore. You know, it's the same bullshit as the Rothschilds making it, you know, no, hardly, still, even today, even though they're probably the most famous that they've ever been, still I speak to people who've never heard of the Rothschilds. And then when you do mention the Rothschilds, you think, oh, it's that banking conspiracy thing, that Rothschilds, Illuminati. Have you read anything to do with this? No. Well, then, if you did bother reading some of this stuff, you would start joining some dots. Yeah. It's all there. You know, we live in an age of information. Ignorance is a choice. All the information that I could ever talk about, and probably more. Bills of exchange, Ed, you brought it up earlier. Anybody can go and read that, but people don't want to read it. Yet you can't go into a shop and promise to pay for a Mars bar without engaging it. I would want to know something about what I was forced to engage in every single fucking day of my life. From when I leave the house, I'm involved in trust law. Why would I not want to know about trusts? It's trust that I walk on the pavement, I don't damage the pavement. Trust I don't damage the lampposts. All this stuff is in trust that I don't do. So why would I not want to know trust law? And then why would I not want to know bills of exchange involving currency that I cannot pay anything with in a debt-based economy we cannot, our debt gets worse and worse and worse.
With unlimited liability?
Yes. So why are we not trying to learn this? Why are we not trying to say, well, hang on a minute, I've limited liability here. I'm not the one taking this full liability. You're the ones that are stating that I take the full liability. Mr. Paul Webster, that piece of paper that is taken in to the court, Mr. Paul Webster is on a piece of paper on a desk, not answering any questions. So they hold that piece of paper up and say, is Mr. Paul Webster here? And like an idiot that I'm taught, I'm Mr. Paul Webster. And they just hand me that piece of paper, Aid, and say, you owe us this money. That's the consent. That's all they need. Are you Mr. Paul Webster? Yes, I am Mr. Paul Webster. Because my mum told me that, and my school teachers taught me that, and I'm now over the age of 16, so I've become Mr. So I'm taught everything that I need to stitch myself up into this system, and my mum gave me a blessing and sent me on my way.
Just something I inadvertently touched on there has sort of brought a childhood memory. And I said about unlimited liability. My dad was a steel worker, and I didn't speak to him for the last 15 years of his life. My brother nor my sister, in fact, they both didn't speak to him for much longer than that. But I remember they used to work in gangs, so there'd be like a scaffolder, and there'd be a burner and a welder and a bricklayer, and they used to work as a gang.
Yeah.
And then my dad came home from work one night and he was devastated because one of the members of the gang was going into business as a limited company. Now, he didn't understand what limited meant, but to him it meant that that man had managed to jump up a couple of rungs on the ladder of life and be good enough to create this limited company. But what limited actually meant, looking back on it, he had no idea. Didn't even come into the conversation.
Yeah.
What it meant to him was this man had managed to, climb enough rungs of the ladder to set up a limited company. And all it means is their liability is limited to the value of the company.
Yeah.
Anything over and above that, tough fucking shit.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing, all those simple words.
Yeah. But like you said, your mum told you were Paul Webster, and then your schoolmaster did. Now, when I was at school, they taught me the theory of fucking lots of things, but facts about fuck all. And if they'd have taught me all the things that I really needed to know, I wouldn't be in the position I'm in now, and all of my neighbours wouldn't be in the position that they're in, and all the homeless people wouldn't be in the position they're in, and all the people who are having to work 60 and 80 and 100 hours a week just to not make ends meet wouldn't be in the position they're in either. We'd all be a fucking sight better off. We'd have a proper economy, and the bankers would have been fucked off years ago. And our fucking not royal family who didn't get married on Saturday because his surname's fucking Hewitt, really.
And now you see why, by the age of 11, these fuckers who go to Eton and those kind of schools are taught the Bills of Exchange Act by the age of 11. It's because they know they can't pay for anything, and they know that they must set the debt off. We've got to learn that, because if people start trying this and trying it from all the angles that they are doing, because when I started it, when I did that first video 4 years ago now, when I did that first video, I stated that this isn't how you do it. This is what I did. These are my results. This is what I stand by. Yeah. I've never proclaimed that I knew how to do the mechanism aided, because nobody did. I was speaking to people all over the place, and people were telling me different things. None of them fitted. None of them fitted. So I could only try it one way. The fact of the matter is, when I did that, I operated with clean hands. My intent was there. I'm wanting to, yes, I accept this debt, I accept this bill, but I must now set this debt off. Where shall I sign it? I don't know where to sign it. What do you mean you don't accept these forms of payment? You participate in the Bills of Exchange Act. You must accept these, especially when I'm holding the Consumer Credit Act up, stating that this negotiable instrument that you're saying you won't accept, well, I can understand you're not accepting it for a commercial agreement, but as per the Consumer Credit Act, for a non-commercial agreement, this must be acceptable, because under the Bills of Exchange, you've taken up two positions, the drawer and the drawee, and you've then took the funds out and issued it to the payee. I must now do something to zero the account. I've done something.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I've done something. Will you accept that and zero the account? No, we don't accept that. Right, well, you've got to now legally notify me as to why you won't accept this Bills of Exchange and this negotiable instrument. And they just walked off. This is where you're up to, because they know they're done, Aid. Council tax. Councils know that they're done. They're charging business rates on domestic properties. They know they're done. Banks know that they can't lend any money. They know they're done.
The banks do, but the people who work in the banks don't. You know, when I went and changed all my accounts over the other week, the lovely girl who dealt with me at the bank, she was great. She did all the right stuff. It was very clear what she was doing. And I said to her, I'm going to be a pain in the ass because I used to work in the industry. She went through everything. And we had quite a bit of spare time at the end. So I then told her about a lot of this stuff and gave her a list of things to watch on YouTube. And at the end of it, she said, thank you very much. I'm going to go home and watch these. You know, and she went, my God, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And I explained fractional reserve lending to her. You know, so there she is, just like I was, working in a bank, not understanding the banking system.
Exactly. Well, I spoke to a mortgage lender, a mortgage broker in the bank. And I just said, this was when I still had the mortgage. I said, I'm thinking of swapping my mortgage over. And I said, can you have a check of it? And I knew they wouldn't, because the other bank had already put a black mark against me credit, so they wouldn't allow it. And I said, well, you do realise that you don't lend money, don't you? Do you? This was HSBC, and she says, yeah, of course we lend money. I says, you're telling me the bank lends its own money? And she went, yes. I went, and I cut my head to one side. I went, are you sure? And she went, well.
Yeah, well.
So shall we just leave it there then?
And it's the same pyramid thing, you know, it comes back to pyramids all the time. The people at the top know exactly how it all works. The people on the next rung probably know 80% of how it works, and so and so and so. And then you get down to the bottom rung, the people that we actually speak to in a bank, they ain't got a fucking clue. All they know is they've got a target to sell so many of this insurance policy every week, and so many of that policy every week, which in 10 years' time will be something you can claim for on an advert, you know.
Yeah. All this PPI, it's all the third-party liabilities.
Yeah.
You know, the insurance policy's there, they're telling you. It's the same with the mortgages. The insurance policy's there, it's there for your PPIs, it's there for your credit cards, it's there for your overdraft, there for your loans, and it's there for your mortgage.
It is.
And the factor is, if I default on my mortgage and it's paid off in full, then I should have no problem going for another mortgage. However, the insurance policy might be a little bit dearer because I've already claimed, and therefore my interest payments might be a little bit higher. But I shouldn't be paying interest to a creditor that is me. I should be able to let myself off for that. And that's,
do you think you deserve letting off, Paul? As the lender of fuck all, as the creditor and the debtor, do you think you should be allowed off?
I'm pretty certain that if I was struggling to pay myself back, I'd let myself off.
I think I might as well. But that's how fucking stupid and obvious this thing is.
Yeah.
But if you try and explain it to anybody, they can't get their head around it because they still think that you borrow money from a bank and they literally move a pot of piles of £10 notes from a big box into your little box, and then your magic card that you put in the wall will let you access that box with your name, and it's just not how it works. Well, and I know I keep going on about it, but if you've not watched Money as Debt on YouTube, it's a fucking cartoon. If you can sit and watch The Simpsons, you can sit and watch that. Yeah? And fucking learn about this because it's dead easy. And once you get your head around it, you then realise that most of what you were taught at school was either fiction or a theory. And you said about the people at Eton. Do you know, a classic education is we've got 15 people in this class, and there's a master at the top who's probably got one of them flat cheese board things on his head.
15 people in the class? How fucking long is it since you were at school?
No, at Eton, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
So they've probably got 15 people in this class at Eton, and they'll be set a problem, and the master at the top will guide the problem, but essentially the 15 students will have a debate and work out what the answer is. So they will always remember that answer.
Yeah.
Because they worked it out. They might have had help, but they'll work it out. And the subject may well be the bills of exchange. A comprehensive education is 50 kids in a fucking room with a teacher who says, here's the book, read it, sit down, you better fucking learn it, because if you don't, at the end of the term, there's going to be a test. And if you don't get at least 70% of it right, you've failed. And you're a failure. And you're going to have to resit it all, and you'll be labelled as a dumb fucker for the rest of your life. So is there any wonder that the elite are the ones who get the decent jobs? No. There is no fucking wonder. It's not by accident, it's by design.
And we've got to realise how the elite became the elite. They fucking robbed, raped and pillaged everything. You know, the fucking opium wars, everything that you can name that we've got or we have benefit from is because these fuckers stole it.
Slavery. Let's abolish slavery. Let's just make everybody a slave.
Voluntarily.
Voluntarily. You can even choose what job you want to do as your slave. So if you want to be a doctor, you can be a doctor slave. And if you want to be a bricklayer, you can be a bricklayer slave.
But depending on which slave you want to be, it depends on how much equity we're going to steal off you.
And if you don't like the slave master that you've got, don't worry, because in 4 years' time,
you can vote for another.
We'll have a year's worth of fucking hype up to some bollocks election where you can choose yourself, and you fucking slave master will be just as much of a cunt as the last one. But don't worry, because he'll wear a different fucking rosette and he might not wear a suit.
Exactly.
But then again, I might be a cynical old fat bastard. What do you think?
I think we're both cynical old fat bastards then, because at the end of the day, I can put my hand on my heart and I can hold my head up high that, I went through some shit, but I've learned through that shit, and I wouldn't want to. Oh, it's such a hard question to re-deal with. Would I change anything if I could go back? No, I don't think I would.
Do you know when Jason kept prodding me and it's him who got me to look at all this and guided me at stuff to watch, and you know what it's like. You go on YouTube, you watch one thing and it suggests 20 others. And I watched and I watched and I read and I watched and I read and I learned, and then I realised that some of the stuff that I'd watched was outdated, but it was a good foundation to move on from, and the usual sort of stuff you go through. And I sort of look back, and one thing that Jason did say to me, when you get to the point where the truth will set you free, but first it'll really fucking piss you off. When I was at the pissed off stage, I fucking rang Jason up and I'm like, you bastard. What you fucking do? What have you fucking done to me? I used to be a rational thinking man, with a fairly decent job, and now I know I left that job a long time ago because of my own, but I'm now this fucked up idiot who can't fucking see his ass from his elbow. And he said to me, but knowing what you know now, do you want to go back in the box? And I went, well, no.
Can't.
Because the truth, you can't. Because the truth is the right and the wrong. That's the truth. And my own belief in what's right and what's wrong is so massive, I couldn't go back in the box. And it's impossible to. Once you've either been shat on from such a height that's made you fucking open the box and have a look, or somebody like Jason has, prodded me and prodded me and prodded me, and I'll thank him, till my dying day. Anyway, look, this is called Raconteurs News, and what I'd love to do for the last 25 minutes or so, or whatever we've got left, is this Google feed thing that kind of comes up. This is your feed, like I fucking asked for it. I had a quick look through mine for about 5 minutes before we came on air, and I've just kind of picked a couple of subjects. And if while I'm saying some of this, Paul, I'm going to ask you what you think, but if you can just have a look at your feed and you pick a couple. And what I'd like to do is kind of pick them to bits and probably take the piss out of them, because that's mostly all they're worthy of. Anyway, I did see this one this morning, and it was our woman. The headline was something like, "Woman drives car into a marathon." And I can't remember what town it was. So the headline is, like, fucking hell, somebody's, all what we've been used to, like down in London and all the rest of it. Now, all that had happened was this woman was blocked into her house in her car, had a family emergency, and had to get out. So she drove her car down part of this marathon route. Now, I don't think there was any malice in it. It was just, and I don't think she injured or even tried to injure anybody. But within the first 3 sentences of that report, it mentioned the word terror. In light of the recent terror attacks where similar things had happened, we think the woman was really stupid. So even when it's not terror, whatever the fuck that is, or if you're American, terror, because they can't say terror, they say terror, in the same way that they don't have mirrors, they have MERS. The word is still there, so that even when it's not something, they say it's like saying, that man's got a silver car, so it's not black.
Yeah.
But we fucking know it's not black, because it's fucking silver. But they managed to get the word terror in there, just as another fucking niggle. Don't forget, you've got to remember that you've got to be scared. And even if there isn't anything to be scared of, we'll make sure there is something to be scared of, because we'll keep reminding you. And then on the anniversary of everything, we'll have a fucking collection, or somebody famous from a bloody soap opera from 10 years ago will crop up and go, oh, we're having a collection. And we're having a collection for the people of whatever terror thing happened a year ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, to make sure that we all still keep remembering that we're all still terrorised.
Exactly. And well, some of the news feed, I don't know about the Google stuff, but some stuff coming up on my news feed now is yet another man has been stabbed to death in Islington as wave of violence grips the capital. Now, I've been looking for the terror word in this, and there's nothing in there, but he's a Sri Lankan national of no fixed address who died at the scene. So
2 people have been stabbed, but it's a wave of terror.
Yes. Well, they're tagging it onto all the other terror attacks as well, aren't they? But, you know, you're talking about a car that might be used for something. Are we going to ban knives? Are we going to ban hammers? I mean, fucking hell, Brian's DIY store's not going to do much if you start banning fucking hammers, are we?
Well, as I've said many times, you know, a cucumber's an offensive weapon if you twat you around the head with it.
Exactly. I mean, you've got hooded men opening fire with Kalashnikovs in Marseille. What's going on? Can we mention migrants in this? Is there going to be migrants involved in it? Can we say that? Is it racist? When you can't talk about things, Eddie, that is what is going to fucking piss me off in the end. Because if I can't talk about something that is pertinent, there's something wrong, there's something missing. We've talked about it before. You know, you can't talk about certain people. Well, if you can't criticise the people who you can't criticise are normally the ones that are doing the oppressing.
Yes. I mean, comedy used to be a fair game for anything, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And it's nothing. It's nothing. I mean, I've been following some of Marcus Meacham's stuff. You know, the Count Dankula, the Scottish who taught his missus's pug dog to do a Nazi salute as a joke. Right now, they wanted to send him to jail and do this, that, and the other, and then they've settled with an 800. I think it's an 800 quid fine that he's now appealing or he's contested. He's adamant he's not going to pay. The factor is, how does this happen? How are they doing this? They are not taking a man to a courtroom for justice. He didn't even have a right. Right, the judges on the panel said that they would decide the context of his joke. So even though he was willing to tell them the truth, yes, I did that joke and it was about this, and it was to find the cutest, most loveliest thing and get it to do something absolutely abhorrent like a Nazi salute. That's what the joke was meant to be. Oh no, we'll decide what the context of it is. So you're going into these places and telling the truth, and it doesn't matter because the judge can decide. How can the judge decide that, Ed? He can only decide that if the court is a commercial court.
Of course.
Because he would only have jurisdiction over commerce. And he is treating Marcus Meacham as Mr. And he is doing him in commercial law, in a commercial court under commercial law. When people stop acting like that, that will be the change. When we've got the mechanism there to say, boom, you can't go any further with this now because there's no harm or loss. That's a joke. Fuck off. We've got to stop this nanny fucking state where people are being employed to think that they can do whatever it says in legislation, because it's only going to take the right kind of fucking weird people to write legislation. Where does it stop? What's illegal then, Ed? Is it illegal that me and you talk about it? Is it illegal that I drink clean water? Well, we're getting to those stages just on that.
You know, it's when I actually had a conversation with somebody earlier today, and I was she's basically infuriated at how much things cost and how her thoughts are. It's like the thought police is there, and they're her words, not mine. So, you know, and I said about the thought, you know, you can't think, oh, well, I don't know. The amount of things now where, like comedy, and it's just oppressed. And it's always, I mean, I don't care what nationality somebody is, what colour they are. I don't care what the sexual orientation is. It doesn't matter to me. But equally, I don't like things like the, what's the word I'm looking for? When you get somebody who says, oh, I'm pro-lesbian women, or, well, you don't need to be. You don't even need to tell me that you're a lesbian woman. You're just a woman to me. The fact that you're a lesbian, well, thanks for sharing, but too much fucking information, don't need to know.
Well, that's the thing, though, isn't it? People can only identify themselves as a group, a lot of people. Yeah. People can't identify themselves as just a man or a woman, as this is me. It's got to be part of a group identity. And when you've got people who can only identify themselves with a group identity, then you've got a group that can be co-opted, coerced, and that's what we've got. That's what we've got with the far left. You know, you've got the far left, you've got the far right, you've got everything in between. A lot of it is not different. A lot of it in the middle is not different, because it's a bit of this, it's a bit of that, and we try and mash everything up and try and come out with something decent, which we've never been able to with all the other isms that we've done. And this, what we've got now, where you've got transgenders, you've got one or two making groups. How many groups would you say? I don't know. But you've got these groups that are talking about transgenderism and all this kind of stuff, and they say that they are speaking for everybody, whereas I'm pretty sure that they're not speaking for everybody. They're speaking for themselves, but trying to identify as a group. Now, if they're going to take control of language, which is, I know Jordan Peterson took a lot of stick for this over the last couple of years, because they were saying that they must use a chosen pronoun by law. So now somebody is going to select that I have to use a certain pronoun, or I'm liable for a fine. That is taking control of language to the next step than what we've already got. Are you the driver of this motor vehicle? It's a bastardisation of the English language, but it doesn't mean what we're taught in plain English. The driver is a completely different commercial mechanism, and it's the same with when you're going on to this stuff. You've got to.
If everybody asks me what my pronoun is, I'm going to say cunt.
Yeah.
What do you wish to be known as? I'm a cunt. See how far they get with that.
Well, what gets me is that they think that they can take control of this language, but then use the fact that, show a bit of compassion. You know, he, she might want to be called V. Call him V. It's nice. Let's be nice. Well, it's all right being nice, but when it's taken into legislation, that's not right. That can't be nice. When I'm being told I must use something, as opposed to, well, if I use it, it'll make somebody feel better. You know, I wouldn't want to offend.
Why can't we just use somebody's name? You know, if somebody wants to be called Brenda, hiya, Brenda.
Well, apparently Brenda's not good enough these days.
Yeah, you know, or Paul, or Stuart, or, you know, what? Well, you know, if I introduce myself to somebody, I'm Aid. You know, what shall we call you? My name's Aid. You know, I went to see a surgeon at the hospital. Oh, Mr. Hardy. No, I'm not called Mr. Hardy. My name's Aid.
See,
that's the name that I choose.
There again, though, when he's doing that, he's keeping you at arm's length.
Yeah.
In business, you know, the legal term at arm's length. It's the same as when you watch these films where the fella goes in to see the chief executive, and he says, Mr. Smith, take a seat. And the fella sits down and says, call me John. And the fella goes, Mr. Smith. And then he goes through everything because he's doing business. And then once the business is completed, they shake hands. Now
And
he's
it's
John. Now he's called John. That's when it is, and we don't know when that starts and when that ends, because we are taught that we call people Mr., Miss or Mrs. as respect. No,
And it's not, because Mr., Mrs. and Miss and Master are the lowest rank of military.
yes.
They are lower than the shithouse cleaner. You are the lowest of the low.
So how do you get people to wake up to that? You've just got to keep talking about it. I mean,
And Webby, I can remember, when I first got my first checkbook, when I went to what was Midland Bank then, and I got my first checkbook.
the listening bank.
And when it said at the bottom, Mr. Adrian Hardy, I stood there and I was like, fucking hell, I'm a man.
Yeah.
And I was exactly the opposite.
You were.
I wasn't a man, but I am now because I know how to be a man.
Yeah.
But what I was then, I was a person, a legal entity.
Yeah.
But I was so proud to be Mr. Look at that, I'm a man, I've grown up. Had I fuck grown up? And until you learn to grow up and be a man, or a woman, or whatever fucking label you don't need, until you learn to be flesh and blood and realise the difference between a person and flesh and blood, living, breathing, you're fucked.
Yeah. And that's not standing in one of those courts and stating that you are flesh and blood, because it's something that they can't hear. The whole point to a county court hearing is that you cannot be heard.
That's right.
It's got to be on paper, it's got to have the right kind of wording, and it's got to be set out in such a way, because if it's not, they can dance around it as much as they like. And standing there and saying, I'm a man, or this doesn't apply to me, is all correct, but you're not going to get anywhere, because the police that are helping them don't understand it, the court clerks don't understand it, some of the judges don't understand it.
No, they don't, that's right. I'll tell you how it was explained to me, that I can't remember who did the song, I will do in a minute, but and basically it was, you don't have to say you love me, because, I'd already know. If you showed me, I'd already know. And it's the same, you don't have to say that you're a man in court, because if you do it right, they fucking know that you're a man in court.
Yeah,
and that you're not a commercial entity.
It's how we act, and it's learning how to act like that properly every time we go in. I was trying to do it as I was going along, and I did something right to drag it out as long as I did, but it wasn't correct.
But in this one of those textbooks you wish you actually got at school, rather than one of the fucking useless ones that you really did get.
Exactly. If I'd have been taught this from schooling age, I'd be in a position now where I would be living wealthily. I would more than likely need a job to bring in some revenue for myself, but there again, all my bills would be sorted, because I would be setting the debt off to the Section 151 officer at the local council, who's meant to be able to deal with all my bills. Look at the Local Government Finance Act. Read them. This is what we're meant to be doing with this debt. It isn't our debt. We're meant to set this debt off. If you do not go and read this stuff, you're going to carry on, and you're going to put your own kids straight back into the debt system where you are. My daughter lives in the Cucumber Castle on top of a cherry oak tree with unicorns. She doesn't understand any of this stuff. If I don't say or do something, Ed, she's going to be stuck there. And I can't have that. I can't. My mum and dad left me here thinking that they'd set me up for life. I had a house there, I had a job, but none of it was true. None of it was true, because everything could just be taken like that.
Oh yeah, we're only, even people with a house, you're only 3 mortgage payments missed away from being homeless.
But there again, that's when it should be paid off, and you shouldn't be homeless. That's what people have got to learn. When when that insurance policy's paid for, that's it. You're done.
Yeah,
you're absolutely done. The only thing the bank can be claiming for is the money that you owe them for facilitating your credit. And, you know, I always pull a ballpark figure, 450 quid plus VAT. How much to monetise my worth? How much do you charge to monetise my worth, to put it into my account so I can use pieces of paper? That's it.
Because that is effectively... You know, and Webby, you know, we've gone 2 hours and we've ended up exactly where we started from. And, you know, neither of us knew what we were going to talk about tonight.
No.
Literally until... Yeah, and, you know, and it always just gets back to the same things. And it's money.
Yeah.
And the banks are all owned by the 13 families. And it doesn't matter what part of your life that shit that you look at, that is where you're going to end up being. Yeah. And it's not by accident. This is designed to fuck you over.
Definitely.
You know, as I've said many times, this world ain't broke, it's working just fine.
It works perfectly well for the people who are stealing the equity.
Exactly right.
Perfectly well, and it's only down to us that it works so well. If we continue to ignore the chance to learn this stuff, to turn it on its head, I say to people, how much better off would you be with just gas, water, electric, and your council tax gone? How much better off would you be? And they say, ooh, about £300 a month. Well, is 300 quid a month better in your pocket? Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Then why are you trying to pay bills that you can't pay?
You see, but what we should be doing is saying, about 15 hours a week. Because that's what they're stealing. It's not money they're stealing and equity. That's not the worst bit. They're actually stealing your time and your effort, your blood, your sweat, and your tears.
Yeah.
That's what's being stolen.
Yeah.
That's what's being stolen. Anyway, look what we're at now, mate. Listen, I just want to say a couple of things just before Andy comes back in. One thing I want to say is, as a lot of you know, Jason's out of action at the minute. He's not in a good way. He's suffering a bit, old lad, and I just want to say, get well soon, mate. I know there's not a lot we can really do to speed your recovery, but we all wish you well.
Yeah, all the best, Jason.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that as well. And everybody I talked to, how's Jason? And it's like I say, it's a bloody frustrating situation, knowing that by what we've done on this little radio show of ours, that we get the piss took out of us because who are you talking to? Nobody listens to you. But we know from what people have come back and said to us that we've helped people all over the bloody world.
Yeah,
and it's a real kick. It's a real kick in the teeth when you can't do fuck all for the people who are closest to you.
Yeah,
but maybe I don't know. Maybe that's part of our path that we're on, part of our test. I don't know, but it seems a bit sick sometimes. But brilliant couple of hours, guys. I've really enjoyed listening to that. But I believe next week, Jason's got Matt Conspiro lined up to come on. And I'm hoping he's a lot better for that. And because I know he's really looking forward to having a chat with Matt. And we'll be having a very interesting discussion, I think perhaps starting around the Paul McCartney mark and seeing where that one goes, because I think he's got an awful lot of information to give out on that. I'm not sure whether it's going to be Monday or Tuesday, because I know Jason originally booked him for Monday, but in case he's not aware, we didn't realise then it was a bank holiday when he booked it. So we'll post that on the website. Apologies, I didn't get my emails out this week to the chat room members, and there's a few little bits need doing with the website, but I'll attend to that this week. We'll all be in order for next week. So
your computer's not booked anymore then?
Sorry? My computer's unbuggered, thanks to a very nice man in Artillery Row, Boston. He did a good job, and he was quite reasonable on price. So anybody needs the computer fixing in this area, go and see that man. He seems to do a good job.
What I think we ought to do is start doing lots and lots of adverts so that we just need to talk for 4 minutes in every hour.
Oh, you mean like the Power Hour radio show with Dave on Christ?
There's a little bit too much adverts on that for me.
Yeah, I thought it needed just one more advert just to finish it off.
Yeah, Raconteurs news. Yeah, I think you're right, Andy. Just echoing what you were saying there. I mean, this year alone, we've gone from, like you said, talking to ourselves basically, where people, I mean, Aidy's had it as well, where he said, which one of Raconteurs news are you? You know, just by talking to somebody. So people are listening. I've had people, you know, come up to me and say that I've changed their life because of the stuff that I was doing. It's very hard to take in sometimes, but I genuinely feel happy that people are taking some of this stuff in. Whether they do anything with it or not, that's beyond my control. That, but if people want to have some kind of a say and not keep thinking that voting every 4 years is going to change something, then learn this stuff. Learn what you should be paying. What you should be paying for, what you can't pay for. Learn. Henry Ford said that if people ever find out the banking system actually works, there'd be revolution overnight.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah.
Go on, Abe. What were you going to say, mate?
No, I was just going to say, you know, it's like the authority thing. You know, we all talk about people in authority, and you know, as I said, I don't have a problem with anybody who. In authority, I've got a problem with anybody who thinks they've fucking got any, because they haven't. Because unless you give them authority, they've got none, and all you've got to do is work out how to not give them authority.
The only things that you shouldn't do is cause harm or loss. Everything else is on the table.
Yeah.
Excellent chat, fellas. We're going to have to wrap it up for tonight. Thanks everyone for listening, and our best wishes, not just to Jason, but all our friends who are suffering a bit at the minute, because there's quite a few of them. We mentioned Alan and Rick Simpson, but there's a lot of people out there who are suffering day in, day out. So hope you all have a bit better week, folks. See you next week.
Tilt your bed and get some oil.
That's the one. See you next week, everybody. We'll play you out with this one. I'd like to dedicate this to Jason. Good night, folks.
I'm off to the hole in the road. I'm walking off school and I'm off to the city, watching telly all night and I'm not looking pretty. See, I got this job downtown, selling knocked off ladies' watches for £1. For a really dodgy man that I met in a dodgy cafe. You know, he said to me, the girl who sold these yesterday wasn't selling very carefully. Police came along and took her and all my watches away. So if you see some coppers, you grab my stuff and leg it, boy, right away. I'll be in the cafe. I'm just a boy from Sheffield, making his way through life. I'm just a boy from Sheffield, making his way. I'm just a boy from Sheffield, making his way through life. I'm just a boy from Sheffield, making his way. So it's been a few hours and I haven't sold enough for my bus fare home. Street selling's pretty tough, so I turn on the charm for the lunchtime rush, with a smile and a wiggle on my schoolboy touch. So the charm is working in the underground. There's a crowd of men and women gather round, and the watches they are going, the money is a flow. Think I'll take a little extra, stick it in my pocket, spend you later. I'm just a boy from Sheffield, making his way through life. I'm just a boy from Sheffield, making his way.
name is Stephen Hawking, and I used to listen to Raconteurs News.
I haven't sold a watch for an hour and I'm dying for a slash. I've had enough of this, so I'm off for a piss. Then a quick walk back round to the cafe. Sitting at his table drinking tea. Looks at me suspiciously. Then with a glance at the watch he says, how did you do? He paid me a couple of quid. Then he said, would you like to come and work another day? I said I'd come back down on Friday. And to that he said okay. So with £2 in my pocket and another 5 in my shoe, I nipped down to Castle Market where a man who looks like Leo Sayer is selling pots with cockles and prawns. You make me feel like dancing. Then off back to dinner on the Wiggers and then home. I'm just a boy from Sheffield making his way. I'm just a boy from Sheffield making his way. I'm just a boy from Sheffield making his way. I'm just a boy from Sheffield making his way. I'm just a boy.
Hiya folks, sorry to interrupt the music. Just to let you know, in case you missed it at the beginning of the show, with no show tomorrow night, we'll be back on Monday next week. Okay, take care, have a great week everybody.